Let's talk a little bit about Mounting Rushmore. This story seems so familiar, yet the format it's supposed to be in sounds very unique. Where did the idea for this story come from?
Oh, well, for Mounting Rushmore, this I wrote and created Mounting Rushmore and Alina is starring in it. Which is super exciting. We just shot it last weekend.
Yes.
Just a little bit about it. We're doing like mixed media, so some
Mhm.
of it's animation and then some of it's is going to be live action. The idea sort of just came from like an amalgamation of queer experiences, of
Mhm.
queer women experiences particularly. But I also think that part of my inspiration for it was that you see a lot of like the closet case narrative for purely gay men in media, but I don't think that you see a lot of that for bisexual men and also for queer women. So I wanted to do a story that sort of blends those two experiences with like we're Alina and I go to Sarah Lawrence, a lot of gay people at Sarah Lawrence. And so we've been able to sort of create this narrative through just sort of hearing our peers' stories and also through our own experiences as well. But it definitely is just through being exposed to like a lot of queer people who have once been closeted. But yeah.
For Alina, what is it like to embody a character like this? I think, you know, having so many different places to draw inspiration from could be difficult.
Uh, yeah, I mean, pretty intuitive, honestly, as someone who's also lived the closeted lesbian experience. Um, it was it was very fun. It was like, yeah, I didn't really struggle with finding the character. I think the biggest struggles for me was I was a total gold star gay before this, and
Mhm.
Um, and so this was, I didn't have the lesbian with a boyfriend experience before, but I got to kind of microdose that this time, which was fun. Um, and that part was definitely not intuitive, but my co-star was like great. Um, and also just having to pretend to totally hate like everyone else in the cast, who are all like the most lovely people who I love so much.
Mhm. Uh, the gay experience is quite unique, and the coming of age story seems very appropriate because for regular coming of age stories, it's just about, you know, conquering some sort of milestone. For a queer coming of age, it's about acceptance, it's about strength, it's about so much more. Why is it important to tell these stories?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. There's so much. I think for one, I think I was a kid who I grew up like I was in middle school. Part of middle school was prior to gay marriage being legalized.
Mhm.
Mm,
And a lot of my childhood, there were not any gay people in media. And I think for one, it's important for kids. I think it's important for youth, like growing up and being able to see themselves represented, see their experiences represented and like sort of not pretending that it's sort of like kooky and not like the most fun experience, but it's also kind of colorful and wild. I think that like being able to see something like a narrative that you resonate with, I think is really important. Like I remember like Twilight was big when I was a kid and everyone was like Edward or Jacob. And like not something that I could really relate to, but
Mhm.
I watched like the show Adventure Time and then
Mhm.
I remember like that was like such a big inspiration for me in terms of all my like kind of cartoonish filmmaking at this point and writing. I think that it was such a big deal when they like hinted that like Marceline and Princess Bubblegum were gonna get
Mhm.
together, and that was just such a huge
yeah.
like this is something I be excited about and something that I feel like I can relate to. So I think it's really important for queer kids and queer adults who otherwise might not understand themselves as well to be able to see different versions of their experience. I also think it's really important to normalize queerness and that experience for people who are not queer and be able to see a different type of story and not make it seem like alien or freakish to people. And so I think
hmm
in a lot of ways it's important, not just for queer people, but also for straight people as well. And you know, yeah.
Definitely. Anything you'd like to add, Alina?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I resonate with a lot of what Maitlyn said. I mean, I honestly, for most of my life growing up, I had no idea I could even be gay. Like, I had no idea that was an
Mhm.
option because there wasn't much representation. There's still very little representation for queer women in the media. Um, and the representation that did exist when I was growing up was, Ellen.
Mhm.
That's kind of it. I had no idea you could be a femme lesbian or any of that. And I think, yeah, just um, having more queer stories being told from the perspectives of people who look and act differently, so that's not just one type.
Mhm.
And I would love to see more like because I'm also a lot of the queer media that we do have it centers around white queer people.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm I look pretty white, but I'm also Latina and
Mhm.
like it would be I would love to see more like queer Latino, Hispanic representation
Mhm.
um for women.
Definitely. And Maitland, you're coming off of a project called Golden Dick, which is very satirical, very funny, but an experience that a lot of lesbians go through. What is it like, changing the narrative to all this?
I think, oh my gosh. Okay, so Alina, yeah, Alina started as well. And
Yes. I looked
did
very different.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Great wig.
Yeah,
but
I also
yeah, and Alina also co-wrote it and co-directed it with me. But it was yeah, I mean, that experience was really, we came up with this because of our experiences coming to liberal arts school. So Alina and I met, Alina and I met freshman year at Sarah Lawrence, and then we became roommates and we had a lot of experiences with a lot of different men on campus who had Golden Dick syndrome, which is something that was coined, the term itself was coined at Sarah Lawrence. So we were really
Mhm.
inspired to be able to make this sketch, like this little sketch between us to be able to
Mhm.
explore the concept because it is a really fascinating concept, I feel like. This like inflated male ego that exists, and also being a queer woman in that space and dealing with that male ego
Mhm.
as well. Um, and so once again, like this was sort of like this was based on like a combined um a set of experiences that we heard around campus, also with our own for this one as well. And we were able to, like my one of my favorite lines in there is the like aesthetically bisexual
Mhm.
aesthetically bisexual.
Mhm.
That's not a direct quote from anybody, but the essence
Yeah.
of sort of like a kind of entitlement to queerness
Mhm.
that some men on the campus, like straight men on the campus, feel. And like I think that um being able to explore also the femme lesbian experience of constantly being doubted for your queerness, that's something that is not foreign to Alina and I, of like just because there's so much associated, and there's certainly masked lesbians who are totally valid as well. But I think that the idea of like associating being a lesbian with inherent masculinity, I think, is a problem, especially in terms of accepting different forms of queerness. I think that's something that we wanted to portray in this project was not only this like in this inflated male ego, but sort of this femme lesbian experience of being doubted. And you're just college gay and things
Mhm.
like that because you don't fit
Mhm.
stereotype. But we also wanted to do it with both Mounting Rushmore and Golden Deck like have a similarity in that I in our projects we want to, and in my filmmaking I really want to explore sort of like the fantastical kind of quality to a queer
Mhm.
experience, and like using like the puppet, like the pianist puppet and Golden Dick and things like that, like not so serious because there's something kind of silly about the experience of
Mm-hmm.
being queer, as much as it's hard and it requires strength and being able to like self-acceptance and all those things are so hard. It's also like being queer is
It's also
kind of loud and beautiful and colorful.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
and absurd.
and
There's
absurd.
like such an absurdity
Yeah,
to the
completely.
whole experience.
So especially in Golden Dick or in our that sketch, we kind of wanted to bring like we use like some horror movie music in there as
Mm-hmm.
well. Wanted to bring like sort of like a horror comedy kind of um essence to it
Yeah.
because that's the part of like sometimes like having to explain your queerness to people is kind of like horrifying, but it's also hilarious. I think that like sort of keeping that tone throughout was something that we really aimed for. But yeah, so that was our experience making it.
That's awesome. And I guess for in your opinions, what has made the normalization of questioning a person's sexuality? Like, why is that the norm instead of just letting people be who they want to be?
Could you rephrase the question? I think I'm not fully understanding.
Well, why is it more normal to question a person's sexuality as opposed to just allowing them to be?
Oh gosh, I
Hmm.
mean,
That's
I
there's some history involved in that answer.
I think that that's a hard one to answer. Um I think stereotypes
Hmm.
play a big part.
Yeah. I think, I mean, ideally in the perfect world, maybe we're a few decades away from this. No one will care or and it won't be as much of a thing, but I think because queerness was so uh demonized for so much of history, it became really important to find like it became really important to like categorize yourselves
Hmm.
because you were already being categorized by your behavior by the rest of the world. And so I think the queer community as a whole has definitely been drawn more and more into finding these boxes as a means of finding safety within those boxes and finding community. Um, and so I think that's what like we're saying is all the like yeah, the speculation about oh, who's in the club, who's
Hmm.
not in the club, um, kind of stems from that need to seek shelter within queer communities.
Hmm.
But I think ideally it shouldn't matter. And I think I hope to see a day when literally no one cares who's gay, who's not, who's trans. Um, but right now I don't know that we're there yet. I'm sure there's also definitely been some overcorrecting
Hmm.
in some regards. But yeah, I think that's the best way I can think to answer that question.
Yeah. And I think that like anything that yeah, I think because it's not normalized, because being queer is still something, it's become much more normalized since like I was like a middle schooler
Hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that because it's still not entirely normalized, there's so much like kind of like ooh about it. Like there's something like to
Mm-hmm.
be kind of marveled at. Um, and
Yeah.
I think that yeah, and like kind of like I think that stereotypes like from like within the queer community, I think there's a lot of like need to fit into certain boxes, which I really hope goes away. But I think from within side of the queer community, I think a lot of it comes from stereotypes that are not, you know, accurate. And I like queerness
Mm-hmm.
a spectrum, and there's so many different kinds of people who are queer, and there's no one way to be queer. And I think that like because of these heavily ingrained stereotypes, I think people are very confused by actual queerness a lot of the time. When, ideally, yeah, like what Alina was saying, like we could all just be who we are without question. But unfortunately, I don't know that Alina and I have full answers for like why
Hmm.
that is, but it is the reality and hopeful for a different one. And I think that's a part of back to an earlier question. I think that's a huge part of why representation is important because the more representation we get, the more different kinds of narratives that we get,
Hmm.
the more different types of queerness can be normalized, and hopefully queerness altogether doesn't have to be something that's seen as like an alien
Hmm.
experience. But yeah.
Definitely. And these projects, how difficult is it to get get to produce them because they're stories that don't really get people's, how do I say this? There's a lot of obstacles to get them made. So how do you get through those obstacles in order to make them?
Well,
Um,
yeah.
Kind of just by doing it ourselves. Um, and yeah, and when it comes to funding, maybe not like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
going to funding from the right people,
Hmm.
being picky and selective with who knows exactly what we're making until it's made.
Yeah.
Um, we're both still students, so
Hmm.
all of these, I mean, some of the biggest challenges honestly have not been uh from pushback about the narrative itself, just that it's so hard in general to make anything without any
Hmm.
money or resources. Um, and so it's kind of just been, I mean, Maitlyn, do you want to?
Yeah, totally. I mean, um yeah, I think it's Alina and I, co-wrote and co-created our sketch Golden Dick, and Alina starred in Mounting Rushmore. I've been doing most of the producing, and on this current on Mounting Rushmore, which we just finished shooting last weekend, and the footage looks amazing, and I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited to start on the editing process. But along with some other student producers, we've been I've been handling a lot of the producing, and that has been really difficult. Honestly, it's a really difficult.
Mhm.
Golden Dick was just a smaller sketch,
Hmm.
so we were able to kind of put it together. We didn't have as much of like a grander vision for it as much as we wanted to make this sketch exploring this syndrome and also a femme lesbian experience at a liberal arts college campus. But with Mounting Rushmore, I mean, we've been working in pre-production for around 9 months.
Wow.
And it's been a huge, I mean, Alina can attest, like with a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of like hard work, but like trying to maintain like a balance and reaching out to everyone I know, former bosses, people who I know have like read my writing at previous points, who really liked Golden Dick, seeing like where I can get funding, just through reaching out to, former sort of like work colleagues and also just sort of people who like friends and family, and just trying to get this movie made. I think that it is fortunate that we're students and we had a huge resource for unpaid labor, which is, it just sounds like, but it's like everyone was so excited to be working on this together on
Yeah.
the, like, I think that like, we had for Mounting Rushmore, we had all SAG actors who all deferred their payments. Huge, just like just because we're students, we have these resources, and I think it'll definitely start getting a little bit tougher in terms of getting funding for narratives
Hmm.
like this as we're leaving college, and we do need to start paying, and it's not a student project anymore. Um, but that's for future us. And hopefully traction with Mounting Rushmore and Golden Dick, we can apply to more grants and things like that. But it definitely is tough, and producing is definitely, I would say, the hardest part
Hmm.
of the whole thing is just getting people to believe um, in your projects. I will say I'm gonna shout out my one of my professors, Heather Winters, who produced Super Size Me. And she taught me freshman year how to make an effective pitch deck. And that has been huge in terms of funding and like being seen as a professional as a student, is having professional resources when you're asking for funding. I also created an LLC called Root and Fruit Productions, and that's been big. And so it's not like, hey guys, like Venmo me this for my short film.
Hmm.
It's like it's actually going into like a real company and bank account, and like being able to be as professional as possible with while still being students and having limited resources has been a big help to us. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on Golden Dick. It's so funny, and I can't wait to watch Mounting Rushmore.
Thank you. I'm so
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
thank you.